This is the WrestlingConEsteef podcast with your host, Esteef Urbano. And welcome to another jam-packed, slam-packed WrestlingConEsteef episode number 3. I hope you all had a great Labor Day weekend. The wrestling world was completely turned upside down, and we're going to get into all of it. We are now on all the major podcast providers, including Apple, Google, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Spotify, WrestlingConEsteef.com, and WrestlingConEsteef on YouTube. So like, share, follow, subscribe on any platform you choose. From the highest of highs to the lowest of lows, AEW has probably had the craziest 8-day period in all of wrestling history for a company. From putting on the biggest event for pro wrestling ever, to having their star being fired just a few days later, about a week later, for something that happened at that very event. And we're also going to talk about Payback, we're going to talk about All Out, and the longest title reigns in history that are current. Gunther is now atop that list with the longest Intercontinental Championship reign of all time. We're going to get into that later as well. Jey Uso also showing up on Raw, and he's been traded. And we're also going to talk about Impact 1000. So Impact celebrating their 1000th episode, and we're going to give you those details as well, right here on WrestlingConEsteef. So the top story these days is that CM Punk has been officially fired from All Elite Wrestling after the incident, the scuffle that took place backstage at All In with Jack Perry prior to CM Punk's match, right before his opening match, before he went out for his real World Championship match against Samoa Joe. And a lot to unpack here. So right before Collision on Saturday, Tony Khan takes to the airwaves to announce that after consulting with legal counsel, outside legal counsel, and a disciplinary committee, he made the decision, and he alone made the decision to fire CM Punk and terminate his contract with cause. And also, he noted that he had never felt more in danger of his own life and safety than he ever had. He didn't like to be, he doesn't like to feel threatened at a wrestling show. He said in 30 years of attending wrestling shows, he had never felt that way. So Tony Khan obviously felt, in danger. There were a ton of different reports out there. Who knows what's really true? But here is what is fact. Fact, before CM Punk came out, Jack Perry had his match on the All In 0 Hour pre-show with Hook. He took a suplex on the windshield of the hood of the limo that he was driving, or that he came out in, I should say, that was sitting on top of the stage there at Wembley Stadium. And after the match was over, Perry looked into the camera directly and showed off his bleeding arms because of the real glass, and he says, "Real glass, cry me a river." And this was apparently stemming from a disagreement backstage where Jack Perry wanted to use real glass, but he was vetoed, and apparently he didn't take that rejection well. So once his match is over, and, Punk is right there in the gorilla position, getting ready to come out, obviously, as soon as he saw Jack Perry's face talking to him, which even though Jack Perry didn't use CM Punk's name directly, it was clear who he was talking to. So CM Punk confronts him. After this, it's anybody's guess what really happened. I don't know who approached who first, but the fact is that Jack Perry got choked out. There were also reports that CM Punk lunged at Tony Khan. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means if he really got up to go after him, or if he just basically did one of those things where he makes someone flinch. I don't really know. But what a way for CM Punk to exit barely 2 years after he arrived to much fanfare. The second episode of AEW Rampage took place from the United Center in Chicago, the same venue where All Out is happening, or did happen, this weekend. And AEW sold out the United Center back then, 2 years ago, on the rumor alone that CM Punk was coming. He wasn't even confirmed, but he was heavily rumored and implied. They sold out the building, over 20,000 plus, and CM Punk came out on that episode, The First Dance of Rampage, and he cut one hell of a promo, said he was back, said he had a few scores to settle, this, that, and the other. Well, 2 years later, those same fans are now celebrating his exit with cause, and boy, did he just not make any friends in the locker room for the 2 years that he was there. Now, a lot of this also goes back to the Brawl Out press conference from the AEW All Out show last year. After the show was over, after he had his match with Jon Moxley in the main event, winning the AEW World Championship, Punk actually injures himself in that match, and during the press conference, he completely trashes his co-workers, the Elite, Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Nick and Matt Jackson, Hangman Adam Page. Called Adam Page some pretty bad things. I'm not going to repeat them here. And also that the EVPs, the executive vice presidents, couldn't run a target. And he just went completely scorched earth. He also completely flipped out about a issue he had with his old friend Colt Cabana, but that's not even the issue. It was what happened after that press conference. So because of how openly he trashed the Elite, part of the problem was also he felt that the Elite were leaking information to Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer that CM Punk was trying to cause backstage problems and get people fired, with Colt Cabana being one of them. Who knows if that's really true or not? I'm not saying it is. But it had a pretty strong role in what happened backstage, so what happened at All In was the second major offense after the backstage at All Out, nicknamed Brawl Out. So after the press conference, he returns to his dressing room. He's got his friend there, Ace Steel, who was a road agent for AEW, and his dog, Larry. And depending on who you ask there, the Elite approached CM Punk's dressing room. I don't know if they barged in or not. Maybe they did. And a physical altercation ensued with Matt, Nick, Kenny being there on one side, and then you had CM Punk, his friend Ace Steel, the road agent, and his dog Larry. At some point, it was reported that Nick Jackson got hit with a chair for real. Who knows if that's true or not? But because of these very violent, seemingly violent encounters backstage, CM Punk has been let go. And now what does that mean for AEW? Well, first, it means that the AEW All Out pay-per-view that took place the following day on Sunday at the United Center was going to look a lot different. Reports came out that CM Punk was supposed to headline AEW All Out versus Ricky Starks for his real AEW World Championship. And because Punk is such a revered figure in Chicago, this obviously led to some fan backlash. And you saw that through the attendance at All Out, which is not what it has been in previous years. Reports were that it only was about 10,000 as opposed to the 20,000 they filled that building with before for other events. So now, AEW Collision on Saturday nights. What's that going to look like? That show was basically built around him. And it had a different look and feel, and now fans are worried that it's going to devolve into a different formula of AEW Dynamite, which has lost some viewers in the ratings, and it has the criticism of being indie-rific. And a lot of this backstage drama is attributed to Tony Khan himself for not growing a pair and tackling these problems head-on directly, which is universally accepted that much of this could have been avoided with the Elite, with Jack Perry, and, who knows? But nobody got off scot-free in this incident. At the Brawl Out incident last year, CM Punk got stripped of his AEW World title, even though he was injured. He was probably going to be out a long time anyway, and he was. And the Elite themselves had won the first ever AEW World Trios titles, and they got stripped of those. The Elite were suspended for a few months. They returned at Full Gear that year. CM Punk would stay injured into 2023 until July 17th, when he would make his return at the first ever AEW Collision, also from the United Center. You see a pattern yet? And he would bring with him the Real World Championship that he never lost from his match with Moxley at All Out last year when he injured himself. And this was after some wishy-washy business on whether he was going to return or not, because there was some, let's just call it, confusion with the people from Discovery Warner Brothers, and part of that was due to the fact that him and the Elite still had, communication with lawyers and stuff going on. There was still stuff happening there that prevented either one or both from completing the deal, I guess. Another wrinkle in this story is that after the Brawl Out incident, CM Punk considered in December of 2022 that he would leave AEW and go to WWE. Not only that, he was thinking, he could work the 2023 Royal Rumble this year and get eliminated by one Kevin Owens, which would lead to a match at WrestleMania 39 between CM Punk and Kevin Owens. Obviously, that never materialized either. But now, CM Punk has nothing, at least for the moment, except the pink slip. Apparently, there will be some type of response that could be explosive. We don't know what CM Punk's contract contains, if it has a non-compete clause, if he's going to be able to work anywhere, or if he is a free agent, if he's owed money. But when you're fired with cause, it would seem that a lot of that kind of goes out the window. You don't get the benefit of the doubt when you are fired with cause. Because who knows? Again, who knows what really happened? None of us were there. But what we do know is that Jack Perry is also suspended, and who knows when we'll see him again. And it's just been wild. So what does that mean for All Out? Well, the event had to be adjusted slightly. It did get the star power that I was mentioning it sorely needed in the way of the Young Bucks teaming up with FTR to face Bullet Club Gold. The main event featured Jon Moxley challenging Orange Cassidy for the AEW International Championship, and a number of other very hard-hitting athletic contests. Kenny Omega versus Konosuke Takeshita, Shane Taylor versus Samoa Joe. You had the TBS Championship with Chris Statlander defending against Ruby Soho, and other matches as well. And we're going to get into all that in just a little bit, but yeah, who knows if AEW will ever be the same. I did mention that they were going to need to follow up strong after the world record they set at All In. I don't think this is what they had in mind in firing their top star, because he was their top star in terms of drawing power. You can say whatever you want about CM Punk, but his numbers were there. He's a part of, I think, the top 3 of the highest grossing AEW gates that they received. One of those being AEW Double or Nothing 2022, which I was lucky enough to be in attendance for when he defeated Hangman Page to win his first AEW World Championship, and the main event of All Out last year in Chicago. Another huge moment. The gate at the first dance, also in the United Center. Also another big day, another big gate. So CM Punk can draw. We know that. But is it really his fault? Did the Elite precipitate this entire incident by being the ones who were difficult to work with in the first place? Because another wrinkle to the story was that CM Punk and the Elite had a meeting scheduled in Atlanta shortly before All In, and CM Punk was supposed to meet directly with the Elite. Tony Khan was supposed to be there, and the Elite canceled at the last minute, leaving Punk completely, disappointed and frustrated. I can slightly understand CM Punk's situation, but you can't go around attacking people in the locker room. And I'm pretty sure that's what got him fired. Or at Gorilla, no matter how upset you were with your travel plans falling through, especially, not having a car driver there to pick you up, you had to take the public tube and basically get yourself lost on the way to Wembley Stadium and your hotel. You can have your opinions, but the moment you start putting your hands on other people in the back, that's a problem. And again, we don't know what happened in the Chicago Brawl, if he hit first or if the Elite barged into his dressing room. But 2 of these incidents in a year does not look good for him. And truth be told, I still think that when CM Punk injured himself last year in the All Out main event, I do feel like he kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say orchestrate, that's too strong of a word, but I think subconsciously he was looking for a way, I don't know, save face, I guess, because he was going to have to take some time off anyway, and he didn't want to admit that he was injured right away, because we all know that he's injury prone already. And the company was going to have to pivot creative plans away from him again, which they had just done before the match with Moxley at All Out because he was injured also. This time it was his foot. And that meant possibly stripping him of the World Championship anyway, even though Tony Khan loves to do the interim thing. So that's a big deal still. CM Punk could potentially respond with a lawsuit. We really don't know. I do think we'll get some more information on this soon, but it's hard to say. And then the question becomes, does he mend his fences and go back to WWE, where he can still be a draw? But reports came out that he still has a lot of high-level heat with some of the top guys in WWE on an executive level, on a competitor level, and overall, it would likely not be a good fit. We don't have any specifics on who these people might be. Obviously, Triple H comes to mind, Bruce Pritchard, and you really can't tell. There's so much that's in flux with this. It seems like there's new information that comes out almost every day. Now, if CM Punk is the one that is shown to be responsible, then he probably shouldn't come back to wrestling. As for the Elite, maybe they weren't suspended long enough. If they truly precipitated the event in Chicago last year, then they should have gotten a suspension equally as long or maybe even fired. Now, I will also say that I am fans of all of these guys. I like the Elite. I like CM Punk. Do I love them? No, I don't. But I do think that if the 4 of them would have somehow been able to get on the same page, the business they would have drawn would have been completely out of this world. That could have been the main event of All In. We could have had CM Punk versus Kenny Omega. And no disrespect to the matches we got, they were all great. But there will be some pretty big what-ifs because CM Punk didn't have a lot of the matches we thought we would watch with him. Once the Real World Championship storyline asserted itself, he was bound to be on a collision course with MJF once again. And after their dog collar match at Revolution 2 years ago, would have been March 2022, that was his biggest match. I don't know. There's going to be a lot of what ifs with CM Punk. There's going to be a lot of speculation on what his future is going to look like now. If he's going to sue, if he's going to do anything at all. But I think it's pretty safe to say he will be doing something to get back in the news again, whether we like it or not. CM Punk has remained one of the most polarizing figures in pro wrestling for his, well, let's just call it his bad attitude. And as a fan, you want to see him out there, but also as a fan, you don't want to see him bring down everyone with him because he couldn't keep his hands off his coworkers. That is really all it's going to take to give him the blacklist. No one's going to want him. No one's going to touch him. But stranger things have happened. Triple H could have already talked to him by now. Who knows? I just can't say it enough. There's so much unknown here still. And what the future will look like. And now, backstage at AEW, with as much drama as they have had, is the problem really gone? Is all of the backstage drama finished? Will we get peace in the locker room? Because there were backstage issues with other wrestlers. Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker. Eddie Kingston and Sammy Guevara. Other examples that I'm probably forgetting right now. But AEW will have a chance to show us that it wasn't all about the Punk show. They'll need to tighten up their booking. They'll need to figure out what to do with Collision. We don't want it to turn into Dynamite Light or Dynamite 2.0 because Collision felt different and it felt good, and it was a very good show. Arguably better than Dynamite. Maybe Bryan Danielson will have a little bit more influence on that, since it's come out that he has been wielding just a little more backstage influence in AEW. Tony Khan sees not just a great wrestler in him, but a great student and teacher and a great man for the business himself. So great for Bryan Danielson, and maybe he can turn that into something after his in-ring competition days are over. As for CM Punk, well, only time will tell, and the results were immediate. You could see it in the all-out attendance. They didn't get the kind of house that they're used to with these big pay-per-views. Also, being just 1 week removed from All In also hurt them. You don't want to oversaturate your wrestling market with pay-per-view events, especially when you're not able to bundle them. Like he said he tried, but he couldn't. He being Tony Khan. He mentioned that he tried to bundle them, but it just wasn't an option. And not only that, what happens to the city of Chicago as a market for AEW? Because that's clearly not just one of their best markets, it's one of their spiritual homes. All Out, All In, as well as, the first All In. And then you have the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, which has become a tradition for them. So, did he kill Chicago because of his actions with CM Punk and terminating him? Should Tony Khan have waited until after All Out to announce the termination? None of that really matters anymore now, because what's past is past. AEW needs to move forward into the future. They need to focus on the guys they have. Oh, and by the way, WWE Survivor Series is from the Allstate Arena in Chicago, or Rosemont, Illinois, which is another place that CM Punk has history in. Because at the 2011 Money in the Bank pay-per-view, it became public knowledge that his contract was about to expire, but he was still the reigning WWE champion. He had a match against John Cena. The crowd welcomed him as loud as they possibly could, giving him the hometown hero's welcome. He would defeat John Cena and then, quote-unquote, escape the Allstate Arena with the WWE Championship, as his contract was set to expire at midnight that night after the show. Literally blowing kisses goodbye to John Cena, to Vince McMahon, who tried to make Alberto Del Rio cash in his Money in the Bank contract to get the championship back from Punk, but Punk had already escaped through the crowd. He would come back a few weeks later using the Cult of Personality for the first time, bringing with him the WWE Championship that he never lost, so one very interesting parallel there. But back to business, AEW needs to focus on growing their ratings, growing their business, selling out arenas, keeping consistent storylines, and giving us a chance to maybe even see the wrestlers we haven't seen much of. And oh yeah, the women's division deserves respect. And there's some talented ladies over there, and, have they put on the greatest matches in the history of wrestling? Not all the time. Have they made mistakes in the ring? Sure they have. But they deserve a bigger spotlight. The talents that they have on the ladies' side, like Britt Baker, Jamie Hayter when she returns from injury, Saraya, the current AEW Women's Champion, Toni Storm, Willow Nightingale, Sky Blue, the homegrown talent. They've got so much talent there that there's just not enough time for them all, and those ladies deserve something special. So a quick break now for WrestlingConEsteef. We'll be right back, and then we'll start talking about All Out. AEW All Out happened on Sunday, this past Sunday, and the CM Punk situation did affect it, but I think they still put on a great show. Back in a moment on WrestlingConEsteef. And we're back with more WrestlingConEsteef. I'm so thrilled you're still with me here. So despite all the craziness that we just talked about, AEW still had a show to put on Sunday night. So the 5th annual All Out pay-per-view was at the United Center in Chicago. So in the All Out 0-hour pre-show, Hangman Adam Page would win the over-the-budget Battle Royal, where the winner would get $50,000 to donate to the charity of their choice, and Hangman Page selected the Chicago public school system. So a wonderful gesture by Mr. Hangman Page himself there, giving the money to the kids there. And then once the pay-per-view went on the air, the first match was Better Than You, baby. The current AEW World Champion, MJF, Maxwell Jacob Friedman, and Adam Cole, as the current Ring of Honor World Tag Team Champions, they defended against the Dark Order, consisting of John Silver, Alex Reynolds, and Evil Uno in their corner. And, Dark Order did what they could, but eventually they fell to the double clothesline. And even some interference from Evil Uno couldn't put them over the edge. So Better Than You, baby, still your Ring of Honor World Tag Team Champions. And MJF, on his way back, he's walking up the ramp. His match is over. He's clutching his head in pain. Samoa Joe wastes no time at all in his music hitting, and he starts going down to the ring for his match with Shane Taylor for the Ring of Honor World TV Championship. And history repeated itself. Back at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn 2, Samoa Joe was walking to the ring as the NXT champion for a match. MJF was one of the security people there that was assigned to escort him to the ring. MJF got a little too ahead of Mr. Joe, literally, prompting Joe to shove MJF backwards and out of his way. Well, Samoa Joe tried to do the same thing now, and this really infuriates MJF, who will not accept this. He runs back to the ring and proceeds to get into it with Samoa Joe. And this was something that I told a friend of mine that was happening. I told him that no matter what happens with the CM Punk situation, that Samoa Joe was going to target MJF. And, well, he pretty much did. So we're probably going to get MJF and Samoa Joe at some point soon. Maybe it'll be at the first AEW Wrestle Dream pay-per-view on October 1st in Seattle from the Climate Pledge Arena. Even though New Japan Pro Wrestling will be sending some stars over because that's supposed to be a commemoration of the death of Antonio Inoki, Japanese wrestling legend. But back to All Out. So in the ring, a scuffle ensues because MJF he will not take that lying down again, being shoved by Samoa Joe a second time. And yeah, eventually MJF leaves the ring at Adam Cole's behest, and Shane Taylor comes out. That's a big boy hoss fight right there, Samoa Joe and Shane Taylor. It was a pretty good match. Joe would get the win and retain. Now the next match would be Luchasaurus versus Christian Cage for the TNT Championship. Christian Cage would be in Luchasaurus' corner, and he's the one who claims the TNT Championship, strangely enough, while Darby Allin would have Nick Wayne in his corner. So Luchasaurus would win a brutal match, but the thing that really stood out to me is, and people are saying, or were saying the same thing about Jeff Hardy years and years ago, Darby Allin needs to tone it down. His style is absolutely insane, and I hope he considers his future and his health. He does so many big high-risk moves, and, it's tough to watch sometimes, but Luchasaurus with multiple tombstone pile drivers and left Darby Allin a lifeless mess, basically, in the ring. He was completely knocked out cold. The next match would see the Redeemer, Miro, versus Powerhouse Hobbs. And as JR said, they locked up like grown-ass men. And they sure did, like bulls locking horns. Let me tell you what, Hobbs is a future superstar. He's a possible world champion. I was lucky enough to get a pic with Powerhouse Hobbs at the Double or Nothing Fan Fest at Mandalay Bay last year in 2022. And Miro, the Redeemer, he's just great. He's one of my favorite superstars in AEW right now. And I think WWE really missed the boat here when Rusev Day took off. They had gold on their hands, but it wasn't the plan that they had for them, so they canned it. They canned the whole thing. Well, that was a mistake because I think that is AEW's gain, despite Miro's, I don't know if you could call it a slow start, but he sure didn't light the wrestling world on fire yet. But as the Redeemer here, he is at the top of his game, and he looks better than he ever has, as far as I'm concerned. So strap the rocket pack to him, Tony. Anyway, this is another big boy hard-hitting match. Miro wins with the accolade. Hobbs wants to shake hands. Miro does, but he is promptly attacked. And then the hot, flexible wife, CJ Perry, finally comes out in AEW looking as only she can. Miro gains the upper hand on Hobbs after the ring, but he leaves the ring when he sees his wife, and he can't believe what he's seeing. He walks out on her, who Miro looks sad and confused as he walks to the back. So some unfinished business there with Miro and his hot, flexible wife. Who knows what's going to come from that? The next match was Chris Statlander, the defending TBS champion, defending against Ruby Soho, who has beaten her every time. Statlander was 0-2. She would pick up the victory. Statlander looked great. She wears that giant knee brace. I hope it's good for her because, man, it looks huge. It looks like the biggest knee brace I've ever seen on her, or anyone for that matter. But I thought it was great that Statlander came out in the ode tribute to Zoolander, prompting Ben Stiller even to respond on X, formerly known as Twitter. So a nice little look there for Chris Statlander getting her victory. The next match was anything but pretty. So on Saturday Collision, before All Out, it was, before we found out that CM Punk was supposed to be in the main event against Ricky Starks. So AEW books Bryan Danielson with the help of Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. So Ricky Starks had whipped Ricky the Dragon Steamboat with a belt a few weeks back, and we don't know exactly how the match with Punk would have materialized, but a audible was called, and AEW would decide that Starks would challenge Ricky the Dragon Steamboat to a strap match on Collision. So the promo's happening in the ring. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat's there at Collision. He's telling Ricky Starks that, oh yes, you need to sign this now. You want a match against the Dragon? You got a match against the Dragon. Sign it now. And it turns out it was the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson. So Bryan Danielson comes out and he signs the contract. And now we have Bryan Danielson, Ricky Starks in a strap match. And let me tell you, those guys went at it. Danielson comes out to the final countdown again, so that always enhances his presentation there. Starks was just dancing around at one point, preventing even getting into the strap, but then he whips Danielson with the weight belt like a dog. Danielson was a bloody mess early on, while Starks was just laying into him. And let me tell you, Nigel McGuinness is still feeling some type of way about Danielson. We really may get a Nigel McGuinness-Bryan Danielson match at some point. But Danielson was taking strap slaps right to the face. Big Bill gets involved, and he gets neutralized by Ricky Steamboat. Both men were a bloody mess by the end of it. A very hard-hitting match. And Starks passes out while in a strap chokehold, and Danielson wins. And, yeah, that was probably the match of the night right there, honestly. Those two guys really put it on each other. The next match was Eddie Kingston, and, well, Eddie Kingston is the New Japan Strong Champion, and his partner was Katsuyori Shibata, the Ring of Honor Pure Wrestling Champion, versus Claudio Castagnoli and Wheeler Yuta of the Blackpool Combat Club. Claudio's the Ring of Honor World Champion, and really, Eddie and Claudio here really hate each other. So they started off, the match was another hard-hitting contest. Shibata's career seems to be on the up and up now after his career and almost his life was ended a few years ago with a severe head injury. But Claudio pins Kingston and gets one for the BCC. Next, we would see Kenny Omega versus Konosuke Takeshita with Don Callis in his corner. And, I don't think this was a surprise to anyone that Takeshita would pick up the win here over Kenny Omega. Takeshita looks like a stud. He's got a great future ahead of him. If he decides to stay with AEW in the long term, I don't know if he has other prospects or if he's signed to a full-time deal with AEW, but he's got a very, very bright future ahead of him. Now we come to FTR and the Young Bucks versus Bullet Club Gold. So this match was set up right after their All-In match with FTR and the Young Bucks last week, where the Bullet Club Gold came to antagonize FTR, and then, the Bucks would show up and basically say, the enemy of my enemy is your enemy, is my friend. I don't know, something like that. Anyway, that was also one of the best matches of the night. It was longer than you might suspect for an 8-man tag, but I like Bullet Club Gold a lot. The Guns are a perfect fit. I've said before that Rock Hard Juice Robinson is a pretty entertaining guy, and Switchblade Jay White, as he could be a future world champion, coming over from All Japan, or from New Japan, excuse me. I don't know why I said All Japan. But, so that was a nice match. Eventually, the coolest spot in the match involved some quadruple stereo atomic drops into tandem sharpshooters, but the Bullet Club Gold would pick up the win in that. And then we come to the main event. So the main event ended up being Jon Moxley versus Orange Cassidy for the International Championship. Orange had the longest championship reign so far this year in AEW at 400 and something days. I don't remember the exact number, but he had 32 defenses, and he finally made it up against probably his biggest challenge, Jon Moxley. And let me tell you, in the first 10 minutes of this match, Moxley completely slaughtered Orange Cassidy. Another bloody, bloody mess. Orange Cassidy would eventually get some moves in and try to make a comeback, but eventually Orange Cassidy could not withstand the assault from the former 3-time and only 3-time AEW World Champion in the company's history. And now he's got his first AEW International Championship reign. So that is probably the best way you could have ended all out. Jon Moxley has been the guy to carry that company from the beginning, literally from the beginning. From his first appearance at Double or Nothing in 2019, from the unexpected to now, I think he's the king of AEW, and whether you like him or don't like him doesn't matter. That's, I guess, something that's very needed to be pointed out, because a lot of people don't like Moxley. Jim Cornette certainly doesn't. I'm not the hugest fan of Moxley, but I see his appeal. He makes me laugh sometimes with his insane violence, and that spot he had it All In with the skewers is something I'll never forget. So, congratulations to Jon Moxley, the AEW International Champion, at the main event of All Out. WrestlingConEsteef, we'll take a brief break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Impact 1000, also the long title reigns of WWE's history now becoming a normal thing again. Stay tuned for more WrestlingConEsteef. And we're back with more WrestlingConEsteef. So this week, Impact Wrestling celebrates their 1000th episode of TV. Currently on Access TV, the first Impact episode aired on June the 4th, 2004 on Fox Sports Net, evolving from the weekly pay-per-view model that started as NWA TNA in June of 2002, founded by Double J Jeff Jarrett and his father, Jerry Jarrett, who ran the old CWA, the Continental Wrestling Association out of Memphis. And they started with a partnership with the NWA, and they crowned a new NWA World Champion on that first pay-per-view, who happened to be the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock, who was recognized as the first ever NWA TNA World Champion. So as this company started out on pay-per-view, it completely flew under my radar because I didn't buy pay-per-views at that time. In 2002, I was working at a pizza place and barely had enough money to cover rent, let alone order wrestling pay-per-view events. But back to the current era of Impact. Impact 1000 happens this Saturday, September 9th at the Westchester County Center in White Plains, New York. And according to Impact's website, here is what you can expect when you tune in. So we have the Impact World Heavyweight Champion, Alex Shelley, to defend against the one half of the World Impact Tag Team Champions, Trey Miguel. And Frankie Kazarian will team up with former Knockout Tracy Brooks versus Eddie Edwards and Alicia Edwards. Former NWA World Tag Team Champions, the America's Most Wanted, will appear. That's the team of Chris Harris and Cowboy James Storm. Now this would be interesting. Legendary Impact rivals, two-time Impact Knockouts champion and one-time NWA Women's World Champion, Awesome Kong, will be in action, teaming with seven-time Knockouts champion Gail Kim, both coming out of retirement to team up and wrestle a match. Also, legendary tag team 3D, consisting of Bully Ray and Devon, will reunite for the first time in 7 years. The Beautiful People, Velvet Sky and Angelina Love, will make an appearance. Also, the return of two Impact original matches, Ultimate X and Feast or Fired. Ultimate X is a match where the X Division Championship is suspended high above the center of the ring, suspended from a couple of cables forming the shape of an X right above the center. The wrestlers have to retrieve the championship belt from the center without a ladder and come down with it to be the winner. Next is Feast or Fired. Feast or Fired match, one of the most unique matches I think I've ever heard of. I've never seen one, but in all four corners there's a pole attached to the ring post there, and each one of these poles has a briefcase hanging from them. So just picture 4 poles with a briefcase in each corner hanging around. It's almost like a 4-way Money in the Bank ladder match, kinda. But the 4 briefcases each contain one of the following. They contain a title shot for either a World Championship match, an X Division title match, a World Tag Team title match, or the 4th case is a pink slip, meaning the wrestler that gets that case is fired. However, before the cases are open, the wrestlers who think they have the pink slip, they have the opportunity to forfeit their case, but they could also forfeit a title match. But, that's the risk they take. Once cases are opened, the holders can cash in on their title opportunities, similar to WWE's Money in the Bank, anytime, anywhere. So, Impact 1000, looking to be pretty entertaining. I'm going to do my best to see it because I need to give Impact a little more time and respect. They have one of the most consistent products out there. They've got great action, and Impact 1000, any wrestling fan should be excited watching that one. So, good for them. Shifting gears now, the discussion about very long world title reigns begins before the WrestleMania era, where you have the top title reigns from the likes of Hulk Hogan, Bob Backlund, Pedro Morales, and of course Bruno Sammartino. They were pretty common until they weren't. I want to say between the late 80s, once the WrestleMania era began, up until the mid-2010s, they weren't really as common anymore. But we're heading back that way, and here's just a look, just a peek at some of the very longest of the current era and of the current WrestleMania era. So, sitting at the very, very, very top is Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, the head of the table. We must acknowledge him once again. Despite him being a part-time performer at this time, he has broken 3 full years with the Universal Championship, and as of Tuesday, September 5th, he has been the Universal Champion for 1,101 days. That is an astronomical number when you think about it. The next longest of the current era does not come to us from WWE, but in fact, the NWA. So when the NWA relaunched in 2019-18, whenever Billy Corgan took over and tried to make it a big deal again, Nick Aldis was their World Heavyweight Champion, losing it to Cody Rhodes, but then he would win it back. So Cody would actually win it from him at the first All-In event. And then Aldis would win it back and then keep the championship for 1,043 days. He became the centerpiece and the cornerstone of the NWA to be revived as a brand. And by bringing a stable legitimacy to the championship, reminiscent of Ric Flair in the early years, he was all the style and substance of Ric Flair without the insanity of it, honestly. So Nick Aldis, I think, was a credible world champion. Also in the NWA was their women's champion, Camille. She had her own reign at an impressive 813 days of the Women's World Championship, losing it to Kenzie Page at NWA 75th Anniversary Show. Now we dip into the smaller promotions who also have very long title reigns. From Major League Wrestling, MLW, the heavyweight champion Alexander Hammerstone kept his championship for 644 days. If you don't know who Alexander Hammerstone is, he is worth a look. Just Google him on YouTube or wherever. You are sure to get plenty of results. I can't imagine that WWE is, foaming over the mouth over this guy. He's big, he's strong, he's got the look, he can talk. So I don't know what his contract situation is, but maybe he re-signed recently, maybe he didn't, but I think he's a perfect fit for WWE. Next, we go south of the border. El Hijo del Vikingo. La Mega Campeonato de Triple A. That would be the Triple A Mega Champion, clocking in at 651 days as of September the 5th, Tuesday. He had won that championship from Kenny Omega. But now, the newest one to join the club is Gunther, who, as of Monday's Raw, has officially won the last match he needed to break the Intercontinental Championship reign of the Honky Tonk Man at 454 days, making Gunther the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion ever, since the first champion, Pat Patterson. So, Gunther's reign with the Intercontinental Championship has restored some major credibility to the championship. He's obviously a future world champion. His current storyline with Chad Gable, I think, is very interesting. I don't even view it as David and Goliath. Chad Gable is very underrated. He's strong and he can wrestle, and he's gosh darn entertaining. Shoosh. Okay? So, I think he deserves the Intercontinental Championship. Maybe he will be the one to take it with the third time's the charm type of thing. Now that Gunther has the record, he can pursue bigger fish to fry. Perhaps the World Heavyweight Championship, currently held by Seth Rollins, or even perhaps the undisputed Universal Championship that Roman Reigns still has his stranglehold in. Now, even though Gunther is alone at the top of the Intercontinental Championship history, he also held the NXT UK title for 870 days, which is the record of that brand. He completely dominated NXT UK. He would eventually lose to Ilya Dragunov, who put on a very good couple of matches with him. Very, very hard hitting. And, Gunther's chops, they are like axes swinging at you. It's really quite impressive. I remember watching that guy wrestle for the first time on NXT UK and going, wow, he's a big dude. He didn't look like he does now. He was chunkier, still as serious as ever, wanting to put respect back onto the mat, because the mat is sacred, as he says. I think he's done a great job. He will be a future world champion, and congratulations, Gunther, on the longest Intercontinental Championship reign of all time. And now that brings us to the other big event that happened this weekend, WWE Payback. From the PPG Paints Arena in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, only 6 matches on the card, as WWE does not like to overinflate the action anymore. Personally, I think 6 is too few for a 3-hour show. But it's not about what I want. I'm just one of many fans. But the first match was Becky Lynch versus Trish Stratus in the steel cage. Most likely as the blow-off that was supposed to happen at SummerSlam when they didn't get enough time on the card because there were only so many spots. But here they are. They're in the steel cage. It was a pretty good match. And Zoe Stark comes in, tries to help Trish Stratus, but Becky still wins anyway. Trish basically disowns. She turns on Zoe Stark. And now we'll probably get a Trish versus Stark feud. And, good for Zoe Stark. I think it's great that she's being elevated. I did enjoy her work in NXT, even if I don't watch NXT that much these days. Not since they transitioned from the Black and Gold brand to the reboot, the 2.0. But she is very athletic. She can do some moves there. So, bright future ahead for Zoe Stark. And she looks pretty good coming back from the injury where she tore her ACL. That's literally the toughest injury. One of the toughest injuries for wrestlers to come back from because it can take so long. Bayley was another good example with plenty of others, I'm sure. But, yeah, great for Zoe Stark. She can do it here, and she'll be a major player, hopefully for years to come because the women's division can never have too much talent in WWE. So the next match saw LA Knight versus The Miz with John Cena as the special guest referee. And LA Knight picking up the win. Not a huge surprise there. Cena counting the pinfall victory. At one point, literally kicking The Miz's arm off the rope as he was trying to score the pin on LA Knight. So LA Knight, on his way up. What does his ceiling look like? Will he ever get a shot at the Intercontinental Championship? Will he get a shot at the World Championship? How about the U.S. Championship? He's got some space to elevate a little bit more. But before too long, you're not going to be ignoring him because it's whose game is it? It's L.A. Knight's game. Yeah. Anyway, so good job for L.A. Knight. The next match was Rey Mysterio taking on Austin Theory in a rematch for the WWE United States Championship. So Rey had won it a couple weeks ago after Austin Theory had a match with Santos Escobar lined up instead, but he repeatedly attacked Escobar. So Rey stepped in, would get the victory there, and he would get the victory here as well. Rey retains the United States Championship. And here was the match of the night for Payback. It was the Judgment Day. Finn Balor and Damian Priest, Mr. Money in the Bank, defeating Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn for the World Tag Team Championships in a Steel City street fight. I think it's humorous that you can have a street fight anywhere and they'll give it a nickname or the city name and it's supposed to be this big deal. Humorous. The Steel City street fight. It's got a nice ring to it though. So that match was everywhere. At one point, all 5 of the members of the Judgment Day, if you count, JD McDonough, they were all out there interfering in the match. Dirty Dom Mysterio took a swanton from Kevin Owens on a table for his trouble. And then you had Rhea Ripley out of nowhere tackling Kevin Owens, spearing him through the barricade at ringside, pretty much out of nowhere, and taking him out. So Rhea is not afraid to mix it up with the men. All of this was after one of the more entertaining spots of the match where Kevin and Sammy kind of ducked out of vision for a while, but reemerged wearing Pittsburgh Penguins jerseys and gloves, and pretty much went the rest of the match wearing the jersey and the gloves. They were on the stage in front of the Titantron. They did the spot where they threw the gloves down and started fighting there. That was funny to see. But yeah, ultimately, the 5-on-2 was too much for Kevin and Sammy to overcome. Their reign is over after winning it in the main event of Night 1, WrestleMania 39 this year against the Usos. And speaking of which, Jey Uso would make his, return, I guess, to Raw as a singles competitor. He was traded from SmackDown after he quit, he said, and after leaving the Bloodline. And SmackDown will be getting someone in return, likely Cody Rhodes, who himself was the one likely responsible for bringing Jey Uso over to Raw, as indicated on this past Monday's Raw when he came out. So Sammy comes out and immediately, is trying to appeal to Jey once again, but he does say that you made it, you got away from them. So I think there's more to come with Jay and maybe even Cody Rhodes, unless if he doesn't go to SmackDown. So now the next match of the night was Rhea Ripley versus Raquel Rodriguez. And the point can be made that this was the weakest of all the matches. I still am hesitant to give it heavy criticism because I always see the effort involved. So as long as I'm seeing the effort, I don't want to crap all over it too bad. But this match did not hit like the others. I think Raquel's time will come. I don't know how long it will take, but Rhea is not giving up that title anytime soon. At least I don't think she is. She could have it up all the way up until WrestleMania next year in Philadelphia. So we'll see. There's still lots of time to go, and who knows, they may even do a rematch, for that very championship at WrestleMania. You never know. And then we have the main event. Seth freaking Rollins defending his World Heavyweight Championship against Shinsuke Nakamura. It was noted that this is Shinsuke Nakamura's first main event of a WWE premium live event or pay-per-view event. And also in attendance, somewhat surprisingly so, was the New Japan Pro legend, the Great Muta, who is a WWE Hall of Famer despite never signing with the company or even wrestling a single match in WWE. He was a WWE Hall of Famer. He was there at ringside for the match, likely to cheer on Shinsuke Nakamura, who himself was involved in one of his final matches with, the Great Muta. So that was a pretty cool thing to see. It's the first time, to my knowledge, aside from his Hall of Fame induction ceremony, that he was ever appeared on WWE TV. So maybe this is something he can do going forward. I don't think he'll have a match, but maybe at least have some kind of presence, but I doubt it. A guy can hope. I think the Great Muta and The Undertaker should have had the match at some point in their lives. I also think Sting and The Undertaker should have had a match at some point in their lives. And ironically enough, Sting was one of the Great Muta's greatest rivals, having many great matches in WCW and in Japan. So, even though the Great Muta is not actually a part of WWE, he's still got those connections within the wrestling world, and his career itself was legendary. Honestly, he was one of the first true guys that I thought was scary in wrestling, because back in the early 90s of New Japan, he would come down to the ring fully face painted, but in a sinister way that I had never seen before. He would also wear sometimes that headrest, or not the headrest, but like a helmet type thing. That also looks scary. He was the first wrestler I ever saw to do the green mist spit out, was the Great Muta. He did the first handstand backspring elbow that I would watch him do, and I probably butchered that word, but that's okay. In any event, his impact on the wrestling world cannot be underestimated. The Great Muta is a legend, and he was there to cheer on Shinsuke Nakamura, who unfortunately, despite targeting Seth Rollins' injured back, was not able to get the victory. And I also thought Mr. Damian Priest with the Money in the Bank would come out and try to cash in here, because Seth Rollins, even though he won, he was, likely in a lot of pain. Who knows if he could have done another match after that. I think that was a blown opportunity, but we'll see how the story goes, because you never know. So the next premium live event for WWE will be Fastlane on Saturday, October 7th at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. No matches have been announced for that yet, but I'm sure that, just like AEW Wrestle Dream, those will start to get put together in the coming weeks. And now we come to the match of the week. So earlier, I talked about Gunther's NXT UK title reign when he was known as Walter. One of those defenses came against Ilya Dragunov on the October 29th edition of 2020 of NXT UK on Peacock. And that's one of the hardest hitting matches I've ever seen. And let me tell you, both men put in a lot of heart. They would have a second match down the road where Ilya Dragunov would eventually dethrone him, but this first one, I think, was the better of the two and is definitely worth going out of your way to watch. So fire up Peacock, the October 29th, 2020 edition of NXT UK. Walter, before he was Gunther, before he became, well, the record-breaking Intercontinental Championship holder before he slimmed down because he had some more weight on him at this time. It's a different Gunther, but he's still the ring general. You can see it, you can feel it, and you can hear it in every smack and every punch that those two made to each other. On that note, I will say thank you so incredibly much for listening to another episode of WrestlingConEsteef.
Have yourself a great night. Toodles.
WrestlingConEsteef, WrestlingConEsteef.
The WrestlingConEsteef podcast thanks you for listening.
WrestlingConEsteef.
Lovely.